And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Welcome, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska aviation weather outlook on Thursday, April 24th, 2025. And this outlook is for Friday and Saturday. And as of this later Thursday morning, we have an area of low pressure over the Gulf. This low will be weakening and moving inland up into northwest Canada as we go through late tonight and Friday morning. That'll have a trough that is along the outer Panhandle coast that pushes in through the inner channels and weakens, but it'll just keep some areas of rain or rain showers going along at sea level and low elevations up through the coastal mountains. It'll still be the potential there for some wet snow. Back to the west, we have a low out here in the Bering with a front extending eastward. This front will be lifting north and eastward with time, spreading some snow, wet snow and or rain mixed up into areas of Bristol Bay along the YK deltas. And eventually that moisture will pivot all the way northward across Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait as we get into Saturday. So looking at for Friday afternoon, could even be some cumulus buildups and isolated thunder shower in the northern Panhandle. Back across the northeast interior and Brooks Range, MVFR conditions, pockets of IFR there, especially around Adigan, Anatuvik Pass westward along the spine and north side of the Brooks Range. You can see the area of IFR YK deltas associated with that front. There'll be a weak secondary low try to form as we get into the early weekend of Kodiak Island. It's not going to have a lot of bearing, but back here north of the Aleutian chain, we'll find the low that's here will kind of pivot and redevelop just north of the eastern Aleutians and then reside over this southeast corner of the Bering Sea here for the early and later weekend. Saturday morning, we're looking at some IFR conditions along the intercoastal mountains of the Panhandle and then even the outer coastal areas. And then back here, we find pockets of IFR around the eastern Kenai, 40-mile gold country up there along the south slopes of the Brooks Range. Also there, the central areas of the North Slope. But most notably, we have a broad area of IFR conditions, lower ceilings, some reduced visibility either by some snow and or snow rain mixed in a little fog that'll begin to extend up into the Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait as that moisture lifts north and then pivots a bit westward. By Saturday afternoon, we find generally MVFR conditions along the Gulf Coast, a few isolated areas of IFR, especially eastern Kenai, western Prince William Sound. Also along the west arm of the Alaska Range where you have easterly flow, upslope flow along the mountains there, west side of Cook Inlet. And then again out here over especially the southeast quadrant of the Bering, including St. Paul to near Nunavik Island, we expect IFR conditions into Saturday afternoon. So looking at the passes starting in the far north, Anatuvik and Adigan passes will find IFR conditions up there along the north slope after you pop out of the north entrance. Otherwise, MVFR conditions at Anatuvik Pass Friday, same thing, Adigan Pass could run into IFR conditions as you pop out of the north entrance there. And then for Lake Clark and Merrill, generally speaking, with that easterly upslope flow, you're going to have IFR conditions, Lake Clark and Merrill, along with some precipitation. Rainy Pass IFR for Friday, and Windy Pass IFR may become MVFR in the afternoon. Same thing, Isabel Pass IFR early in the day, Friday becoming MVFR. Further east, Mentasta is in enough dry air there to be VFR throughout the day, but if you go further north or south, you may encounter MVFR conditions. Tanita Pass should generally hold around MVFR on Friday, and then down toward Portage Pass, generally the heart of Portage Pass out toward Prince William Sound will be MVFR, but the west entrance is looking VFR, is often the case. And then the far northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White, is looking at lower ceilings there as the result of IFR conditions. And the freezing levels at the surface run across the central Bering to just south of St. Matthew and Nunavik Island, but come back onshore into the southwest interior. And as this front works its way northeastward, there's enough warm air that you're going to have a mix of wet snow and rain in areas here, especially along Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay. And as you get further inland and northward, it'll be mainly some wet snow once that moisture crosses the lower Yukon and works its way and pivots northwestward as we get into Friday night and Saturday morning. Otherwise, we do have freezing levels bump upward with that frontal system. It's not a strong front. It's actually more weakening into a trough, but we do find freezing levels above 2,000 and 4,000 feet as you get southeast of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. And then temperatures overall in the mainland are on the cool side, even though the freezing line will be running up into the Matsu Valley and then down along the Gulf Coast into the inner channels of the Panhandle. In through central Canada, the freezing levels start rising back up above 4 and 6 and even 10,000 feet. But in the meantime, where there is moisture along this front that's going to be working and spreading northward across the southwest and western interior Friday into Saturday, we have that bit of elevated freezing levels aloft, so we could see some moderate icing above 8,000 feet around Kodiak Island, southwest Gulf. We find back out here as a secondary colder pool of air rotates in as another little low will take shape just north of the eastern Aleutians early in the weekend, above 6,000 feet in any of the precipitation here. But this is all mainly rain. This is mainly rain. But up through here, we're looking at a mix of wet snow and some rain getting in there. And then finally out toward the east, there could be some convective showers, maybe even an isolated flash of lightning, rumble of thunder, northern central Panhandle on Friday. And there could be some moderate icing above 6,000 feet in some of those thicker precipitation producing clouds. So looking at the jet stream level, we have a jet core around 100 knots southeast of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific. And as we bring it down to 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, we find southwest flow running parallel to the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. That's south of those areas in the North Pacific, 35 to locally 50 knots there south of the eastern Aleutians. And then as we get into the lower levels, we find trough here out over the lower Gulf. Ahead of that, westerly flow to 35 knots. Southwest winds upwards of 35 knots south of the lower Alaska Peninsula, and then a weaker northerly flow over the western Aleutians, but more notably up here, coming in along the Arctic coast, Lisburn Peninsula, we do have winds 3,000 feet there. 35 to 40 knots, strongest off of that area of Cape Lisburn. So that's where we're going to find turbulence, the best chance for some moderate turbulence. Friday will be coming off the west end of the Brooks Range to that area around the Lisburn Peninsula between Cape Lisburn and maybe Point Lay, surface to 4,000 feet. And then another area where there could be a little moderate turbulence coming in around that off of Shelikof Strait, or I should say Kamishak Bay, up through Iliamna into the southwest interior. There could be a small swath of moderate turbulence, surface to 6,000 feet on Friday.